Have you ever sat at the edge of your bed, the light from the window casting long shadows on the floor, and quietly asked yourself, when did I become invisible? It's not that something terrible happened. There was no big argument, no cruel goodbye, just time and silence. First, the calls became shorter, then less frequent. And now, days stretch into weeks, sometimes longer, without even a message. Not even a quick, "How are you, Mom?" or "Thinking of you." That you start to wonder, was I too much? Or maybe not enough? It's a question many parents ask in the quiet hours, when the house is still, but the heart is loud, and it hurts. Not because you expect your children to worship you or check in every day, but because you raised them with love, with care, with sacrifices they'll never fully know. And yet now, it feels like you've been shelved, forgotten, as if your relevance has faded just because your hair turned gray or your steps slowed. But I want to tell you something, and I want you to really hear it. Being forgotten by others doesn't mean you disappear. There's still power in you. There's still purpose. There is still life, not just existence, but rich, meaningful life waiting to be claimed, even in this chapter. And that's what this moment is about. It's not about blaming your children. It's not about chasing after what isn't being offered freely. It's about you taking back your strength, gently but firmly. It's about learning 5 quiet, steady ways to stay mentally strong even when the phone doesn't ring, and the holidays feel a little too quiet. Let me start with someone I once knew. Her name was Evelyn. Evelyn was the kind of woman who baked for everyone but rarely received a thank you. Her children loved her. She was sure of that. But they moved far away, built lives of their own, and somewhere along the way, she became background. She told me once, "I don't think they mean to ignore me. I think life just got busy." But that doesn't make it hurt less. What Evelyn did next surprised me. She didn't confront them, didn't guilt-trip them, didn't break down in front of them. She quietly began nurturing herself like she once nurtured them. Every morning, she wrote 3 lines in a notebook, things she was proud of, no matter how small. I remembered a joke from the 80s and laughed to myself. I folded the laundry and sang along to Frank Sinatra. I smiled at myself in the mirror and meant it. That tiny ritual, 3 lines a day, became her first act of defiance against invisibility. She was showing up for herself. Mental strength doesn't begin in grand gestures. It begins in those moments when you choose to be kind to your own mind. When you stop replaying what you've lost and start watering what's still alive inside you. And there's something else that helps. Something a bit harder but deeply freeing. Letting go of the need for explanation. Many of us spend so much energy trying to understand why we were forgotten. We analyze conversations. We reread old texts. We search for signs of distance, of resentment, of failure. But not every silence comes with an answer. And chasing answers can exhaust the soul. Sometimes, the most dignified thing you can do is accept what is and choose to rise anyway. It's a quiet kind of strength, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. It simply breathes and keeps walking. There's a man I met years ago, Henry. His daughter stopped visiting after marrying someone who didn't click with the family. At first, he tried hard to stay in her world, bought gifts, called, sent messages, no response. Then one day, he decided to stop chasing, not in anger, but in peace. He picked up his camera again, something he hadn't touched in 30 years, started photographing parks, trees, birds, smiles of strangers. It didn't erase the ache of his daughter's absence, but it reminded him he could still create joy, still see beauty, still build something that belonged to him. And wouldn't you know it, a year later, his daughter showed up with tears in her eyes, saying, "I thought you were mad at me. But then I saw your photos online. You looked happy, and I missed you." Here's the strange thing. When you stop begging to be seen and start truly seeing yourself, others start to take notice too. Not always, but sometimes. And in the meantime, the life you build for yourself, it becomes your shelter, your strength, your sanctuary. You don't have to harden your heart to survive being forgotten. You don't have to turn cold to stay strong. You only have to begin a quiet return to yourself, to the parts of you that don't depend on anyone else's invitation, the parts that sing when no one is listening, that smile even when no one's watching, because those are the parts that no silence can erase. And those are the parts we're going to tend to. Together, from this moment forward, there's something quiet and powerful about no longer needing to be needed. It's not that you stop caring. It's that you finally begin to realize that your worth never depended on who called you or who forgot to. It wasn't built on Sunday dinners or surprise visits. It was always yours to hold, whether the house is full of voices or filled only by the ticking of a clock. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It's not a switch. It's a slow unfolding. And often, it begins with a simple question. What would my life look like if I stopped waiting for their love and started choosing mine? That question guided someone I knew named Madeline. She was 72, and her youngest son hadn't visited in over a year. Every time she texted, it was short replies, busy. Next time, later, Mom. She used to wait by the window on holidays, just in case. She cooked too much food, kept the lights on a little longer. But then one winter evening, she put the roast back in the freezer, lit a single candle, turned on the music she loved from her childhood, and whispered to herself, I deserve joy too. That was the beginning, not out of spite, but out of clarity. Madeline started painting again. The walls of her home began to fill with little bursts of color. Friends would stop by and marvel at the way her joy seemed to grow from the inside out. And when her son finally called one afternoon, no guilt, just a casual, hey, Mom, how have you been? She didn't lean in with longing. She smiled and said, I've been living. That answer held weight. It said, I'm here, with or without your attention. And that presence, that groundedness, is what people respond to, even if they don't realize it at first. See, when you're always explaining why you're hurt or why you feel neglected, you put yourself in the position of convincing someone to care, and that's a heavy burden. But when you simply live authentically, calmly, with quiet dignity, you send a message far stronger than words. I respect myself enough to keep growing, even in your absence. That doesn't mean you stop loving your children. It just means you stop placing the health of your spirit in their hands. And in doing so, you model something profound not only for them, but for yourself. This brings us to something else, something subtle but life-giving. The power of choosing peace over proving a point. When someone forgets us, it's easy to want to remind them, to poke, to drop hints, to send messages laced with hurt. It would have been nice to hear from you. I guess you're too busy for your old mom now. But those comments, even when true, come from a place of pain, and pain rarely invites closeness. It often creates distance. What if, instead, we chose a different response? Something like silence that speaks of strength, distance that isn't cold, but calm, not to punish, but to protect your peace. This is what Henry did. A retired teacher who used to keep a calendar filled with his children's birthdays, anniversaries, even their pets' vet visits. He remembered everything, but his kids, they often forgot his own birthday. Sometimes, they'd send a message the next day. Sometimes, nothing at all. He spent a few years quietly grieving that, and then, one year, he decided not to wait for their attention. He booked a trip to the coast, went alone, took photos of the sunrise, ate fish and chips at a seaside cafe, walked barefoot in the sand. When he returned, he printed out one of his photos and wrote on the back, I celebrated myself this year. It was beautiful. He sent it to his children in the mail. That was it. No lecture, no guilt, just truth. And that small gesture landed heavier than any complaint ever could. When you begin to respond like that, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with clarity, it realigns the dynamic. You stop being someone who's waiting to be included and start being someone who lives, regardless. You also start attracting different energy. You may notice that people lean in, not because you demand it, but because they can feel something rooted in you. The irony is, we often try so hard to be close to people that we end up pushing them away with our anxiety. But when you center yourself, when you nourish your own joy, tend your own garden, let go of old stories, you become someone worth coming home to again. And here's something tender but true. Not every child knows how to love well. Some are lost in their own overwhelm, their own unresolved wounds, their distractions. That doesn't excuse their absence, but it explains it. You can spend the rest of your years waiting for them to become someone they're not yet ready to be. Or you can become the version of you that no one, not time, not silence, not neglect can diminish. That's how strength is built, not through fighting, but through releasing, through redirecting, through small, consistent acts of care for yourself. Whether it's a walk through the park in the golden morning light, or a cup of tea enjoyed with music that stirs your soul, or writing your thoughts in a quiet journal just for you. Each of these is a seed, and over time, they bloom into something your children will notice. Even if they don't say it aloud, even if they never come back in the way you hope, they will feel it, that you remained dignified, grounded, and whole. Not because they remembered you, but because you remembered yourself. It's a quiet kind of power, the moment you stop chasing their attention and begin returning to your own center. For some, it feels like a breath after holding it far too long. For others, it's more like a slow exhale, the kind that comes after years of hoping, waiting, wondering. What shifts, first and foremost, is your posture, not just how you sit or walk, but how you carry your presence in the world. Not weighed down by longing, not bent forward with regret, but upright, rooted, steady. That's the kind of change you can't fake, and it's the kind of change your children feel. Even if they don't fully understand it, there's something magnetic about peace. It doesn't demand, it doesn't perform, it simply is. When you stop calling them just to hear their voice, when you stop texting things like, just checking in, haven't heard from you, and instead go days or even weeks fully immersed in your own life, they feel the difference. They feel the silence, but not the guilt trip kind. It's a silence that says, I'm no longer reaching outward to soothe the ache. I'm tending to it from within. And that kind of emotional maturity, especially in later years, is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. It's not about cutting people off or going cold. No, it's about emotional boundaries. It's about not letting your sense of self rise and fall based on someone else's memory of you. And when you embrace that, you begin to glow a little differently. Take Abigail, for instance. She's 68, retired, and used to describe herself as lonely in a crowded family. With 4 children scattered across the country, she was often the one initiating all the contact. She sent birthday gifts, handwritten cards, even care packages filled with things she thought they might need. Most of the time, she got little in return. A text here, a rushed phone call there. She carried that pain quietly until one day she realized this pattern wasn't sustainable. It was draining her joy. So she did something radical. She paused. She stopped reaching. And instead, she started painting something she hadn't done since her 20s. Her first canvas was a mess, she said. But her second, it held a sky so beautiful it made her cry. That was the beginning. Soon, she joined a local art group, made new friends, hosted small tea gatherings in her garden, and slowly, the ache began to fade. Not because her children called more, but because her world became full again. And here's the irony. 2 of her children eventually did start calling more often. Not out of obligation, but because something in her shifted. They sensed it. They were curious. They wanted to be closer to this new version of their mother. Not the one who waited by the phone, but the one who had become quietly radiant. That's what happens when you stop seeking proof of your worth and start living it. It echoes. It draws others in, not because you demand their time, but because your presence feels safe, strong, and full. You become a lighthouse. And here's something I want you to hear, deeply and without question. You are allowed to be happy, even if they never come around. You are allowed to build a life full of color, warmth, and music, even if they never say I'm sorry. You are allowed to laugh again, to dance in your living room with the curtains open, to host dinner parties where no one shares your blood, but everyone shares your joy. Because family is more than biology, it's connection, presence, and care. And sometimes, as hard as it is to admit, the people we birthed are not always the people we grow with. But that doesn't mean you are broken. It means you are brave enough to keep evolving. So how do you hold that balance of still loving them, but no longer living in wait? You love with open hands. You leave the porch light on, but you stop staring out the window. You let your heart stay soft, but you build a life that doesn't collapse when others are absent. It's not about bitterness. Bitterness is heavy, and it stains your spirit. It's about release. It's about choosing joy over judgment. That doesn't mean you don't feel sad sometimes. Of course you do. Grief lives in these spaces, especially when the people we love grow distant. But that sadness doesn't have to define your days. You get to decide what takes up space in your mind. You get to wake up and ask, what do I want to feel today? Instead of, why haven't they called? And over time, those small decisions, the book you pick up, the walk you take, the kindness you offer yourself become your strength. They become your song, and whether your children ever hear it or not, you do. You carry it in the way you move, the way you smile to strangers, the way you still make your bed in the morning, not because anyone will see it, but because it matters to you. These are the dignified moves. They're not grand, they don't shout, but they're steady. And in their steadiness, they teach you again and again that being forgotten by someone else doesn't mean you have to forget yourself. Thank you for staying with me all this time. If you've listened this far, I want to say something very simple, but very true. You matter. You really, truly matter. Not because of how often someone else calls you, not because of how many times your phone lights up, or how many visits you receive, but because you are still here. You are still breathing, learning, loving, feeling, and that is no small thing. There's a strength in you that can't be measured by calendars or phone logs. It's deeper than that. It's in the quiet way you've kept showing up for life, even when you've felt invisible. Even when the ones you love most forget to say, I see you. So if this message has stirred something in you, a memory, a pain, or even a flicker of hope, I want to honor that. I want to sit with it beside you, like a trusted companion, and tell you this. It's not too late to feel whole again. You're not too far gone. You're not too forgotten. You're not too old to create new connections, to experience peace, to be surrounded by people who cherish you for exactly who you are now, not just who you were then. And that wholeness, that peace, starts with you. It starts with the little things, speaking kindly to yourself when you wake up, letting go of the guilt that's never belonged to you, not apologizing for having needs or feelings, not shrinking to make others more comfortable. It grows when you give yourself permission to feel joy again, when you say yes to things that nourish your spirit and no to things that drain it. It expands when you look in the mirror, not with disappointment, but with gentle recognition of all you've carried, all you've survived, and all you still have to offer. This isn't about pretending everything's fine. It's about acknowledging that while others may forget to call, you are still deeply worthy of love and connection. And sometimes, when we begin to treat ourselves with the same care we long for from others, we discover we are more resilient than we ever realized. Maybe you've spent decades putting others first. Maybe your life was defined by giving your time, your energy, your money, your dreams, and now, in this chapter, you're wondering what's left for you. The answer, there's so much waiting on the other side of pain. So many mornings still ahead, where you get to decide how the day will feel. So many walks you can take, meals you can savor, books you can lose yourself in, people you haven't met yet, who might one day become family, not by blood, but by bond. And if the ache of being forgotten ever creeps in again, as it sometimes will, I hope you remember this. You don't need to beg for love. You don't need to explain your worth. You don't need to chase anyone who walks away. You only need to return to yourself, again and again, with kindness. You only need to build a life that feels good from the inside. If your children call, that's beautiful. If they visit, that's a gift. But if they don't, you still have a full life to live. You still have sunsets to watch, laughter to share, wisdom to pass down, whether to friends, neighbors, or someone you meet in the most unexpected place. Your story doesn't end with their silence. It begins again and again, with your courage to stay soft and open in a world that sometimes forgets how to listen. And before I close, I want to invite you, if you feel comfortable, to share a piece of your story in the comments below. Have your relationships with your adult children changed over time? What has helped you stay mentally and emotionally strong through it? You never know who might read your words and feel less alone. And if this message spoke to you, if it made you feel seen, even just a little, I would love for us to stay connected. Click the subscribe button so we can keep walking this journey together. I'll be right here, week by week, continuing to offer what I can from my heart to yours, because you deserve that. Not just content, but care. Not just advice, but a space where your experience is honored. So thank you. Thank you for your time, your trust, and your presence. Take a deep breath, and remember, your worth is not up for debate. It never was. Stand tall in your truth, and may peace find you again, right where you are. You are not forgotten. You are home,